All right, we just talked about how you play a hand when you flop a set. Now we're going to talk about how do you play just a slightly worse hand, which would be flopping two pair. Well, the key to figuring out how to deal with two pair is understanding what kind of two pair you have. So we need to think about the three different ways that you can flop two pair. Way number one is to flop top two pair. So this would be a situation where you had a hand like, let's say, ace queen, and the board came ace queen 4. Now you've got the two very best possible pair that you could have on this board. Now the second way that you can flop two pair is to flop top and bottom, meaning top pair and bottom pair, or top and bottom pair. Now this would be more like a situation where, let's say that you had ace of spades, 7 of spades, and the board came ace of clubs, jack of diamonds, 7 of hearts. Now you flopped top pair with the ace and bottom pair with the 7s, but for example, somebody who had ace jack could beat you. Now the third way to flop two pair is to flop bottom two pair. Now this means that you've got a hand where there's one card higher on the board than the two pair that you actually flopped. So as an example, let's say that you had a hand like 9-8 and the board came king 9-8. So you've paired those bottom two cards, but you haven't paired the top card on the board. Now, the reason why this is a really important thing to think about is it kind of tells you how worried you should be about the board and the decisions that you're going to have to make in the future of this hand. It's one thing to flop top two, and that hand you can actually treat very much like a set. It's another thing to flop bottom two, where you have to be much more worried about what's going to happen to the board, and this all comes down to sort of viewing this as different texture, as in the set example. So the first step to playing playing two pair well is to figure out, do I have top two pair, do I have top and bottom pair, or do I have bottom two pair? Because those hands are actually going to play very differently. So let's start off with the easiest of these three situations, which is top two pair. So again, this is a situation where, let's say that you have a hand like ace queen and the board comes ace queen 3. Now, I'm going to make this pretty easy for you guys because you've already learned all this stuff about how to play sets. And here's the good news. You basically play top two pair the same way you would play sets. What this means is that you're going to take a look at that board that you flop top two pair on, and you're going to say to yourself, look, is this a board that's going to be really dangerous to me? So, for example, it's really different to flop top two pair when you have a hand like, say, king queen, and the board comes king of spades, queen of spades, 8 of diamonds, than it is when you have a hand like, say, ace 9, and the board just comes ace 9 3. Now, in the first example, that board is highly textured, right? So even though you have a hand that's very strong, like top two pair, you have to be very concerned about what that turn card's going to be. Is it going to be in suit and create all those flush possibilities? Is it going to be an ace? An ace is really bad for you because not only does that put out that jack 10 possibility making a straight, but it also means that ace king or ace queen would have outdrawn you at that point. Even ace 8 would have outdrawn you. So you need to be really careful when that ace hits. If a jack or a 10 hits or a 9 hits, those all also complete straights for you. So there's actually a lot of cards that can come on the turn that might make you sort of sick to your stomach. Now, compare that to having, ace 9 on an ace 9 3 no suits board. Now we're not really too concerned about the kinds of cards that can hit on the turn. The only cards that are really going to mess us up would, be a king, a queen, jack 10, but that would mean that the person would have had to specifically been holding those specific cards. So we're not really worried about what's going to happen to that board on the turn. Now, what that means is that we're going to take a look at how did we play sets in this position, whether in position or out of position, and we're going to play it relatively similarly on these two boards. In other words, when the board's something like ace 9 3 and you flop top two pair, you can play it relatively slow as if you flopped a set on that same board. Meaning when you're in position and people bet into you, you can flat call and take the hand a little bit slow. Obviously, if they checked you, you would continuation bet. every single time. When you're out of position, you're going to be, usually continuation betting. If you are checking, you're going to be looking to check call and not check raise people off that hand. So you can take those hands pretty slow. You can contrast that, though, with if you have a hand like king, queen, and the board comes king, queen, 8 with 2 suits, say 2 spades. Now you're going to be in that same situation that you were when you flopped sets on these kinds of boards, and you're really driven to play these hands very fast. That means that if a player bets into you, you're going to be raising them pretty much every single time in order to try to play that hand pretty fast to avoid decisions on that turn card. If a player checks to you, you would always bet and not allow a card to come off. Cross your fingers that you get check raised there. When you're out of position, you're usually going to be betting out unless you really feel like you're definitely going to be able to get a check raise opportunity in. Remember that checking there can be very dangerous because you're worried about allowing a free card to come off. So basically, look at the top 2 pair, say, am I on a textured board? Am I on an untextured board? And play it accordingly, pretty much just as if you had a set, because honestly, the quality of that hand is about equivalent.